Hello, everyone. Gil Roberts here of BrickBridge Consulting. Thank you for attending my speaking session. We're going to be talking about human-centered workflow design, how you can implement that in your practice or your business if you're a client. My name is Gil Roberts. As I said, I'm the partner and director of operations here at BrickBridge Consulting. I'm also the podcast host of the Citrix Developer Solutions podcast, which is available on all podcast platforms. You can reach us at Twitter at BrickBridge Consults or BrickBeat Consults and BrickBridgeConsulting.com. So a little bit about me. We started BrickBridge Consulting in 2016. I'm one of the original partners and founder, as well as the current operations director. I have an MBA in entrepreneurship. I'm a CCSP, of course, and microapp certified. Who is BrickBridge? Well, as I stated, we were founded in 2016. We're located here in Louisville, Kentucky. BrickBridge partners with innovative organizations, both public and private, to be able to bring world-class enterprise solutions via a lot of Citrix platforms. We do have a Citrix practice. Our Citrix practice is around the SaaS portfolio. So we're a little bit of a different Citrix partner where we do some virtualization. We don't really do too much networking, but we really hone in right there on that SaaS portfolio. Also, we do a lot of developer content for the Citrix partner ecosystem. Mentioned the podcast. We also do a lot of videos. And many of you probably have heard of us because of our hackathon wins over the last couple of years. So definitely check us out at our YouTube channel and on our podcast to view some of that content. With that, our services are as such. We really do a lot of SaaS implementation. So that's Podio systems. That's how we got started. And that's what we did mainly for a long time. But we have a lot of C# developers on staff. So we have 18 developers. So we do a lot of API, fully custom coded API integrations for the Citrix portfolio, but also other SaaS platforms, particularly bringing them into the Citrix ecosystem for workflow solutions. We do some virtual desktops, infrastructure, remote application delivery. We also do AWS development. We're an AWS shop on top of being a Citrix shop. So we do a lot of custom C#, PHP, Python builds around the AWS suite of products. We also do hosting of a lot of Lambda functions, which are really great for these Citrix SaaS platforms. Lastly, we're an Arrow partner. Arrow ECS is our distributor. We do Citrix licensing, content collaboration, virtual desktops, all those kinds of things. We love iGel, so shout out to them for their innovative thin client hardware. All right, let's dive right into it. So we all have a big problem. The biggest problem that we have here in 2021 and beyond is the nature of remote work. So the nature of remote work has changed a lot of different industries on how they execute with their employees and the experience of those employees. So down here on the blue arrow, remote work, do you trust what your reports are doing? Are they doing work in a traditional, middle-level managers would want to understand and be able to see the bodies in the seats? So those that might be a little paranoid that people are working from home, maybe they're doing dishes, maybe they're watching after their kids. That's a real thing. It also decreases a lot of one-on-one time. That's a big problem, as well as how do you promote well-being and keep people motivated and engaged when they're at a home office or sitting on their couch getting their work done. How do you keep them from falling into ruts? There's also a compounding SaaS problem. They're working from home. They may be on a managed device. They may not be on a managed device. And there's all these SaaS softwares anyway that we got to work with or deal with. So, how many browser tabs does everybody have open? And you've heard a lot of Citrix messaging. This is very similar along that line. We like to focus in on the number of clicks to get through a task. How many browser tabs do we have to go through? How many different SaaS pieces of software we have to have passwords for? How many clicks does it take? Now, I know a click is just like a second or two, but ultimately, the more clicks there are, the more the human being has to remember to get through all those. So if you have a business process that's multi-chained, that introduces a lot of possibility for human error. So we want to make sure that we look at the number of clicks. Also, how many systems are you in? Do you really need to do one thing occasionally in systems that you were trained on 2 years ago? That's a question we like to ask. Training, general statistics are is people really only get about 80% during training and only remember 20% 2 weeks later. Training's not cheap, especially when you're rolling out new SaaS softwares. There's an investment in training. You got to pull people off production, whatever that means to you. There's tickets and passwords, and it's just a lot of stuff. So a lot of times people get this during their new hire phase. There's a lot being thrown out. They're trying to figure out the job, and then there's all these systems. So, you throw that in, you got new employees that are starting out on remote work. It's been over a year now, well over a year and a half, going into 2 years. Geez. What does that look like for them? They're at home. There's no people to look around when they're doing their training. They're not going to remember a lot of it anyway. 1/5 of it's going to be retained. What are you doing? Especially maybe something 2 years down the road. Could be if you're a manager or an executive, you might only touch that system once or twice a year. What are we doing here? So when we look at these things, we want to understand, like, let's get some mirror time with ourselves and try to understand who the human being is actually doing the work. A lot of work being done today is being done by software. It's not being done by human beings. A lot of the stuff, that productivity waves come through, and we need to understand that human beings are, well, first off, expensive. They require wages and PTO and vacations, and they get sick, and they have children, they go on leave. They're very expensive elements of business, sometimes the biggest expense in business. So why are we doing this to people, right? Why are we training them on stuff that they're not going to use? Why are we trying to micromanage them when no human being likes that? Why aren't we giving them support that they need? Why are we throwing like 70 pieces of software in front of their face? It just doesn't make a lot of sense anymore. And especially when you center that into remote work, it's just a really hard narrative to continue to believe. So here at BrickBridge, what we've implemented is human-centered design. I know human-centric designs out there, we call it human-centered. You're going to see a lot of parallels, but we start with that human interaction layer. There's a human being, they have wants and needs and desires, and they're sitting on the other side of the screen in the keyboard. They're working for you, and you're paying them either salary or hourly. They're being remunerated, and that's like a meter in a taxi. It's running. So let's help them help you. And the first thing we need to do is kind of like, what should they be actually doing? What's actual value? Is it holding the chair down? I don't think so. What actual value is delivering creative and value-added thinking, solving the problems that are necessary to drive the business. Handling exceptions. Software is doing a lot. We just talked about that. But sometimes there's exceptions to the process that need to be handled. That probably has to go by a human being, maybe even a managerial human being if somebody needs to sign off of it. And human beings make decisions in context. Software is going to make decisions based on a set of rules. Human beings are going to understand those rules, but they're also going to make that in context. That's why you pay them, ultimately, because otherwise software could just do it, right? Let's be quite honest. And we don't want to burden the human being. And this is an important slide, so I'm going to spend some time on it. We don't want to burden a human being with a zillion tabs, multi-click, have to remember everything. While the kids, in remote work, kids run around in the background, right? I have a toddler. I know how it works. And you just miss stuff. Why put the gotchas in there, right? Let's just give them what they need to get the job done so that you get the value based on what they should be doing. So having a dashboard, a single place for workers to access everything that they need to pay attention to and bring the work to them. Third is the automations. Let's stop with the busy work. It's 2020. It needs to end. People, just because there's 8 hours in a shift doesn't mean that people want to do 3 hours of actual work and 5 hours of looking busy or doing paperwork. I come from the nonprofit industry. I spent more time on the paperwork than actually fulfilling the mission. And it's just not why, right? Why? Now, I understand that KPIs need to be tracked. There's beans to be counted, boxes to be checked, but let's see what we can do to severely limit that, right? We want to cut that out as much as possible. We want people on creative task, which is the long-term value. Yes, KPI tracking is great for short-term value, but what's the long-term value? And that's what we want to look at as creative. That's what's going to give companies strategic advantages. Ultimately, it's that creative thinking many moves ahead and creating value as a part of their job. And that's creative work. It's fulfilling work. Fourth, and this is like a cake. It's like a layer cake. When we look through these solutions, integrations, let's kill the tabs at this point. Automations will kill some of them, and it also do the paperwork and things we just discussed. But let's try to tie these systems together as much as possible. No more hassle of switching because you got to do this and this process, that and that process. Now, look, I understand it can't be all eliminated. Hopefully in the future it can. But what we can do is reduce it as much as possible. If you got 4 pieces of SaaS software or some company software that's old and sitting on on a piece of metal in the basement, let's try to get everything together so that we can understand a better process for that human being to go through. Don't stop setting people up to fail with these multi-step processes without these integrations. You got duplicate entry, it introduces error. Lastly, we want to look at the systems of record. A lot of these SaaS softwares have a lot of value to add. And that's not just the Citrix portfolio, it's anything that a company may be using. I mean, let's be honest, there's a lot of different pieces of software that's available for companies to really do a great job and deliver a lot of value. We're not going to replace them, maybe eliminate them if we can save some money and save some headaches that are associated with additional software that's not needed. But we really want to do a deep dive down into those systems of record and see what their capabilities are, see what we can do them. A lot of platforms are coming with workflow automations inside of them. Can we leverage that? Can we bring that in to the rest of the process and kind of have batons going through these business processes that require a lot of different pieces of software? That's the cake that we're trying to solve. And for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to be talking about how these layers interact together and the way that we look at it from our design standpoint and what we do for our clients. So the first thing we're going to talk about in HCD, human-centered design, is the layers and the components together. So with that, the simplest process path is often the best. I mean, what's the old KISS method that a lot of militaries use, keep it simple, stupid. There's no reason to have complex or esoteric processes inside of our business. I know some things are complex. There's lots of exceptions. We talked about that. There's, it's not so simple, stamp widget, roll down line, sell customer, right? I get that. But when we're involving human beings, we really want to keep the process simple so that when there is complexity introduced, that is what they're paying attention to, is the complexity. That's why you pay them for the brain, right? Otherwise, you just buy more processors. So we want everything out of the way until we run into what they're really there for, why you need a human being. So keep it simple, move it through. And then what we do is we allow for exceptions, and then we bubble those exceptions up to the human being. So what I'm describing here is you getting out of the way as the designer and really allowing the human beings to do work as they're meant to be and what you're paying them for. I keep saying this over and over again. It'll be on the test, right? Like you're paying them for a reason, and it's 2021. It's not 1921. We have a lot of software. You're leveraging them. Leverage human beings in the way that's much more creative and better for your organization. And the first step of that is to organize their work. It can be divided in discrete steps. A lot of repeating process, and we'll talk about non-repeating process in a minute, but a lot of repeating process, checkbox A, B, C, D, all the way down the line, Z, double Z, however long the process is. Let's divide them up. Executives, directors, senior, middle layer management, look at your processes. And if you go to the whiteboard, that's why we got the whiteboards back here, draw the boxes, draw the arrows, cut all the main lines of business down as much as possible into these discrete steps, which we'll call deliverables. In the case of creative and complex undertakings, what we want to do is put that box on the whiteboard, but notate it, right? Because that's what we want to bubble up to human beings. We want to notify them in that simple dashboard that we talked about so that they can pay attention to that. Next, you want to guide them, right? Groom that, prioritize it, tell them what they're doing. Hey, if they're working from home, they got the kid chasing around, they got 30 minutes to jump in before that next Zoom meeting. What's the most productive 30 minutes that we can have, right? Like let's look at that, think about that as a way to guide them to be exactly. A lot of people are working into the night, they're working all the day, the shifts are broken up because remote work does that. It's starting to happen even in the regular workplace. People, as they come back to work or are just picking off tasks, prioritize them and go, look, we can go, you got a meeting in 30 minutes. Here's several tasks that you can go ahead and get knocked out. Just moves the ball forward, even if it's creative tasks or those box checking tasks as well. Lastly, automate it. Modernize workflow, digitize everything that's possible. The transactional tasks, got to get to software as much. Just get there. I mean, don't force that upon people. I understand that there's a section of the population that they're okay with that. That's what they want to do. let's get them in the right seat on the bus, right? Let's get those transactional tasks, the important ones that they need to understand. For those creative types in your organizations, look, everybody has an employee that doesn't do something, right? And it doesn't matter. No, okay, I'll do it. They're not. They're creative. Stop it. You utilize them. They have a lot more value there. You're paying them for their creativity, so utilize it. Okay, so we're going to talk about human interaction. We've got a couple of personas here. When we do design, we look at personas, and we try to keep them away from the word job role. It's somewhat interchangeable. You might see that during this presentation. Don't worry about notes. Slides will be up there. So I'm not going to read all this stuff. So you'll get your slides. But what we do is try to look at the persona of that job, because a lot of times when you hire someone, you're not hiring the role, you're hiring the person to fill the role. What is the persona of those people? I mean, you're not going to hire people that are completely shy and have stage fright to go out and give pitches, right? You're just not going to do that. There's a persona there, right? Like a salesperson, our buddy Cliffhanger here, he's an outside sales employee. It's going to be outgoing. Guess what he doesn't want to do? Paperwork, right? You guys got sales guys in your organization. What they want to do is get on the horn and talk to people and close deals, right? Let's get out of the way. Let's close those deals, right? Or Jerry Riggs, our IT administrator, he's dealing with a lot of tickets. That's a lot of box checking that he's got to deal with. Let's help him get through that task so he doesn't pull his hair out and quit and move to a competitor or go to another job or demand raises, right? Let's get out of the way and just tailor the design to that persona. Again, we're going to organize, guide, and automate their work. You guys can read the notes here, but try not to do the design based on job roles, call center level employee too. Just go, it's a call center employee. They're on the phone a lot. Let's design around that kind of person that's going to A, be recruited and take that job, and B, what they're going to be doing as a human being in the context of that job. All right. Everyone here is very, very familiar with Workspace. So I'm going to run through this one pretty quick. Workspace, Citrix Workspace is our tool of choice when we look at this. I know there's some competitors out there, similar pieces of software, but Workspace does it. They keep it relevant, groomed, and simplified. Relevant, they know what they should be doing when they should be doing it. Groomed, that feed is set up by standard operating procedures. So you know that the important processes, particularly ones that repeat, are going to make it through without any kind of errors, miss, drop balls, whatever you want to call it. You know it's going to get through the process because it's written to that standard operating procedure. Let the executives get their hands back onto the steering wheel. And lastly, simplified, right? Just get them through. If it's quick process, great. If not, we got to get a creative time in here. We bubble that up with an exception or bubble it up as creative work. Layer 3 is the automations. And what our target is with automations is really, first off, job satisfaction, right? We really want employees that you're investing in the training, you're investing in their well-being, you're investing in them with their wages and their remuneration. No one wants to do busy work. Stop it, right? Just stop. So that kind of stuff typically for most people is not very satisfying. So what we want to do is use automation to remove that. Also, error reduction. Process people, you would think that if you did it 1,000 times, you would remember every time. In a vacuum, sure, they probably should. But reality is real, and the cell phone's going off. Maybe they got a mom with cancer or something terrible, some kind of tragedy going on in their lives. I mean, yeah, they've done it 1,000 times, but today they might be having the worst day of their life. And with remote work, you don't know it. You can kind of see it when you're inside the office. You can see somebody's having a bad day, but with the new paradigm, it's not. You're not going to have that. Let's try to eliminate that, right? It's very demoralizing. Lastly, productivity and compliance. So these you can kind of look together. Productivity is keeping employees focused on that long term, while compliance is making sure that the standard operating procedures of the organization are followed, and all that short term information that the company needs to understand its position in real time is also collected. So paradoxically, you need to look at the long and the short term. Automation helps us separate the two things away. When a human being needs something to do that's more short-term bucket, okay, with simplified and get them on that. For productivity reasons, let's keep them on the creative task. Integration. So, it's increased security, less entry in, increased integrity. Data across systems are synchronized. You're decreasing context. The person only needs to focus on the things that need to be happen. The mental drain of all the switching or trying to remember, you think about a multi-click process in a single piece of software, and then you add a second one with a multi-click and a third one, it's a multiplication problem. And it might be a simple process, but just the amount of actions required just make it very complex. It's not just the thinking required in a process, it's also the remembering. And lastly, reduce training. We try to integrate systems away. Maybe you're not getting rid of them, but try to get rid of them from the frontline employees, the frontline managers. If they only interact with a few times, the HR examples that Citrix puts out it's a nice universal example, right? Okay. System of record is down at the bottom. Now we got a Workday example here as I was just talking. It is the golden record. Things are happening down in this system. And that's why we want to use those workflows that are down in there to really juice these up. We want to try to get as many systems of record on automation or integration. Now, those that need to have access to the system of record, let's say you're an HR professional inside the organization, of course you need access to Workday. I mean, that's your job, right? But, Joe the plumber that's out in the field, he just cares about PTO, what's his paycheck, and does he have any vacation days? There's no reason for him to be monkeying around in Workday, right? Let's just surface those. If he really needs to get in there, he's probably, because it's HR, probably still getting a password to those systems. But honestly, we can skip a lot of that training because we can just surface those right there for him, and it's contextual to his work. So here's some examples. And again, you guys will get the slides, but we look at, okay, organized work at the human layer, stress reduction, guide work at the human layer, that's prioritization, and automating work, that's less soul-sucking jobs, right? Like, that's important to keep people at the organization. Okay, why should we care about unit-centered design? Well, it's a new productivity wave. Productivity, security, reporting KPIs that lead to a higher bottom line ROI. I'm leaving this up here. Again, I'm not going to read these slides. You guys will be able to download them, take these as your notes. But ultimately, we want to make sure that the employee is working in an organized, guided, and automated manner, because we may not see them. We may never see them. There's lots of cases of people hired during the pandemic. They've never been seen in person. Security, super important. I don't think I have to explain that. Reporting and KPIs, still need to understand where the business is at in the short term without bothering the long-term creativity. All these kind of add up to a great bottom line ROI increase. This can be empirically measured. You can stand with a stopwatch and go file a PTO request at the employee, and then when they're done with their side, go over to the manager that has to approve it, restart the stopwatch, then go over to accounting or HR, whoever handles that, start the stopwatch again and look at that. And then when we design it through something like Citrix Workspace, start to watch, stop the watch. It's going to be fractional, right? I mean, people still have to do it, but it could be, we're going from minutes to seconds, or 10, 11 minutes to 2 or 3 minutes, and then you go times the wage, right? And there's your money, there's your cost savings. Where this is ultimately going is we want, especially with remote work, creativity is the goal. That's the goal. Now, we still think about, and this is like a typical office worker, what we're looking at is administrative tasking, about 48 minutes. It's 10% of the job. You're still going to have to do some of that stuff. We can't eliminate all of it. Not all systems are ready. Not all things are eliminatable. Maybe you're still handling exceptions. We also want to reduce communications time. Now, I know that sounds, again, a little paradoxical, but we want to keep communications tight, on point, and allow for more productivity during those communications. So no more the thanks emails to like 100 people. Let's reduce that down about 20% of the time. With remote work, you're going to have more communications going out. 5%, which is a lot of the savings we're saving, we love to be able to put that back to the employees. So companies are going to pick up a lot of gains from this. So let's give some of that back to the employee and invest in them so they stay. So that's well-being, culture, growth. That's about 15, 25 minutes a day, somewhere in that range, which is about the water cooler chat time, right? You got to work with other people and you go through some tough times. Lastly, we want 65%, that's 2/3 of their time in that creative and value-added work. That will hit your bottom line. That's a lot. That's a lot of time focusing on things that help your organization. We got a couple examples on ROI. These are some of our estimates and some of the things that we've looked at. 28% reduction in labor costs, 80% more retention, increased lifetime value employee, increased time to value, get less training, get people right into the mix, and they're ready to go. So thank you so much for your time today. We'll expand on this topic as well as many others inside of our November 16th webinar at 1:15, come to brickbridgeconsulting.com. You can register. You'll see the red banner. And thank you so much for listening in. Get out of the way, keep it simple, and we'll talk again soon.